Where do you want to start?
Best show ever.
Best show ever. Oh, we're going to jump right into it. Best show ever, I feel like, is incredibly difficult to define just because...
Can you point the mic a little more at your face?
Look right here.
Yeah, there you go.
So best show ever, I find it kind of difficult to define just because there's been a couple times where just the way the audience is, whether it's the way the audience is or the people that are there or the environment or place that I'm in, it's all a culmination every time of those things that make the shows what they are. So although you may have a whole bunch of people at one show or you might be in a place you really love for another show, they're all a little bit different, but the way those things combine make them out to be the best shows. There's a couple that come to mind. One is I went back to Washington recently to play a gig over the summer. It was a few gigs, but two were back-to-back gigs at a friend's brewery that he owns, and they were for a going-away party and a beer release party. Those were the two events we did back-to-back nights for. And it wasn't that there were a whole bunch of people there, but the people that were there were incredibly special to me, and the environment we were in was very special to me, and the fact that I was going back to kind of where I got my start in music. All those things made it rank up there with easily being one of the best shows I've ever played. It was a going-away party for a guy I'd served in the military with, and when I got out of the military, I was in Washington where the show was that I went back to play. So going back to where my music got its start, playing at a venue that is owned by one of my closest friends, for some of my closest friends who'd seen me go through some really hard times in my life, and all at the same time doing it for a guy who was super important in my life for his going away party. All those things just made it one of the best shows I've ever played. And I remember the first night we played, it was for another buddy's beer release that he did. It was also a guy I worked with. But we got really tuned up that night, and I remember struggling the next day, and the next show being worrying it was going to be a little bit of a long show. But as soon as I saw what it was for and we started playing, we played 4 hours straight without a break, and it was one of the most adrenaline pumping highs I've ever had, and it was such an awesome experience. And it just kind of went to show, like, you don't need a ton of people in the audience, and it doesn't have to be like a sold out crowd. If you're playing for the right reasons, all those shows are always going to be super important. And then so there's that side of the spectrum, and then the other side of the spectrum, I got to play a few weeks ago in Kentucky, kind of in the home of a bunch of my heroes, and I got to open a show for some people that are really important to me, and important to what I love about music, and that was a sold-out show. There's 450, 500 people packed against the stage, and I remember standing up on the stage, and I looked out, and I didn't think it'd be full, but it was, and they were just kind of looking at me like, who's this out-of-towner coming to Kentucky where music is so important to us, thinking he's going to perform. And I'm sure they weren't thinking that, but that's what I'm thinking. And they're so incredibly kind there that they just want to hear good music. And I remember kind of glancing over at my banjo player, just kind of thinking, we're going to destroy this because I am so excited right now. I felt all my bones in my body shaking, and I was so excited to get playing. And I just remember we hit those first few notes, and I started hammering on the kick drum, and you could feel the walls and the floor of that place shaking. And that's the other end of the spectrum, where you've got that sold-out crowd who are there to listen to music and appreciate it and hear the stories, and it really kind of brings it full circle to one of my favorite shows is I play where I got my start in music to a small crowd of people that really love me and appreciate where I've come from and what I'm doing. And then the other end of the spectrum is I can play a show to a sold-out crowd who doesn't know me, but they can hear those stories, and it just kind of shows that progression and that full circle.
Dude, that's awesome. Bones shaking.
Literally. Like, the only other time I felt like that, and I think I might have told you, I've told a couple of people, but the only other time I felt that just incredible adrenaline pump, just total absolute focus, is when I would be getting ready to do anything in the military that was related to anything we were doing overseas for the short time I spent over there. And it was just a absolute utter focus, sheer adrenaline pump. Nothing else mattered, totally in the zone. And I just was, I've always been a guy who's been like, I don't want to talk about it, just let me show you. I always let my actions speak louder than my words. And I knew I didn't need to tell anybody what I was going to play, how I was going to play it. I just wanted to let those first notes ring out and get into the music. And I knew I could bring people along for the ride, and that's what it was about. And then I was jacked the whole time, and it was just absolutely an unbelievable experience.
I was going to ask you what you're going to compare it, if you could compare it to anything, but you just did.
That's
like,
the only thing I could even come close to equating it to. Is just I've never, and you know that focus you feel because you've been in that position before, where you've trained and you understand everything, but you have to be turned on and switched on, and it's a different kind of focus in a little bit of a sense because you're not worried about the crazy aspects that can go on overseas, but it's the same type of testosterone boosted, just total sharp focus, utterly high levels of performance, and it translates in a way that I didn't think it would until I was up there. And I kind of felt that sensation, and I was like, wow, I haven't felt this in a while, and that's the only thing I can think that it feels like.
Yeah, if I'm hearing you correctly, it's being able, it's hitting on so many different levels is why it's such an elevated experiences, especially in the two examples you gave.